And to all fairness to Barbara, someone took her name off her mailbox. And but is our name written in heaven? And so no one's taking it off, huh?
I said, yes, it is, and she's going. If I'm here, she's going. She said we have to go together.
Oh, it's a pact over there, yeah. So no, and it's because of what Christ has done for us, and also no pressure. Please let Jack have a prayer or a sermon that will inspire us, okay? Well, luckily the inspiration's not in me; it's in what we're reading here. So with that being said, let's move right to Mark 10. We finished this section about the young rich ruler, but there's a question that comes up out of that discourse with this young man. And remember, just to catch us up, that he wanted to know what he needed to do to inherit eternal life. And he said, I've done all the things you've asked in the old law, kept the law. And Jesus, feeling compassion, said, do you lack one thing? Sell all that you have, give to the poor, and then follow me. And he went away grieved because money had a control over him. He owned much, and he just couldn't let go. But that's when Jesus said, it's very difficult for a rich man to get to heaven, but all things are possible with God. But then we're going to see the disciples raising their hand like, whoa, 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 whoa. We heard what you said. Sell everything and then follow me. They go, well, we gave up everything and we're following you. What about us? Now, is that a good question, first of all, on face value? Yes. Is there assurance, there's a promise, for us? Yes. But what's the backstory for the disciples that perhaps motivated that question? What have we been hearing from them? Who's the greatest? What's in it for me? There's the little rivalry going on between the disciples, and that's going to continue. So you can't help but think that maybe some of that is going on in their mind. So Peter is the one that voices a question. And does that not sound like Peter? Anytime someone's going to raise their hand and speak first, it's usually, Peter, right? And so he asks this question, but I think the answer is just so powerful with what he tells us there. And there's so much confidence we can get in the assurance he says there. Let me find it. Verse 28. We have left everything and followed you. Now, first of all, let's look at the statement. Did they leave everything? What was the history? When he called them, they left their boats, their father, their family. And Matthew, when he was called, where was he when he was called? Yeah, he was in his office. He left it all behind. They literally left what they knew, and I don't want to say severed relationship, but certainly postponed them to make a new one with Christ as they followed him. So it's a fair question. Now, does Jesus ask really the same thing of us? He's already said, if you want to be a disciple, you got to desire it. If you want to, let him deny himself. Does that suggest some severing of past relationships, of what you have been doing? Pick up your cross, because there is going to be some hardship, and then follow me. So the answer he's going to give, I think, is passed down to us as well. There is something in it for us. So Jesus said, truly I say to you, there's no one. Now notice who he includes in the leaving. He says there's no one who's left a house or brother or sister or mother or father or children or farms. Now, is it just leaving for leaving's sake? No, he says for my sake, for the gospel. Now, that's interesting. Jesus already taught about when it comes to father and mother and then Jesus, and you have to make a choice between the two, what do you have to choose? He said, if whoever loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. Now, he does not mean don't honor your parents, but if your parents are putting on pressure on you to go this way, and Jesus is asking you to be authentic and true to him and go this way, and you have to make a choice, and you choose to love parents more than the Lord, there's no denial there. There's no separation. You're not worthy, right? And so he even says your life. He who loves his life more, you're not worthy. So you got to be willing to sacrifice anything that Satan puts in your way to make a decision between the world and Christ. All right? But everyone, it's going to be different, isn't it? Some of it's money, some of it's other things. But Satan knows what it is, and he's going to place it there. All right.
I like the way that John says it here because what he says is so comforting, what we have to deal with in this world. But I used this passage this morning when I woke up and read it. But he says in 1 John 4, verse 4, you are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing we always have to keep before us, because Satan is always trying to disrupt our progress, but we have that assurance that who's in us, the spirit that Christ gave us is in us, and he's going to have us overcome.
That's right. It's always worthwhile. All right, so here, if you left right here, does the proposition of leaving Christ look kind of dismal? If you've left your father, you left your farm, you left everything. If you just stop there, it looks like, what? Is that what I got to do to become a Christian? Well, yeah, but then we have the result of leaving. He says that he will receive. Now, it's interesting. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6 says that without faith, it's impossible to please God. You have to believe two things given in that verse. You got to believe that God is, he exists. Now, a lot of people believe he exists, but what's the second thing you have to believe and have trust? He's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. That would be to follow him. And that's what he's talking about here. God's a rewarder of those who follow him. Now, in following him, you have to leave something in order to follow. We show that. Discipleship, you have to leave in order to follow. You can't follow two things at once. But there's a promise here, and you should never feel guilty in saying, I'm following Christ for the reward. It's okay. Now, the question would ask, Dean and I had this question. We were talking about it. Would you follow Jesus if there was no heaven or hell? Before you, oh yeah. No, think about it. No heaven, no hell. So there's no reward, but there's no punishment. You just cease to exist. Would you still follow Jesus?
I'd follow his guidance. I mean, the Bible gives you a good, easy life.
Yeah.
If you follow just the principles of the Bible, your life is going to be...
All right. And now that's the argument. If you didn't hear it, if everyone followed Christ's teaching, would we have a better world in which to live in for right now? Yeah, would there be any need for law, legal, justice and courts? If everyone followed Christ, we're talking about idealism, right? No, there wouldn't be any need for it. But Clinton's going there, I don't know if I would or not. Why do you hesitate? Would you follow Christ?
If there was no God.
Yeah, we're saying no heaven or hell. There is a God. There's just no consequences. Yeah?
What this is taught is a lot easier way to go than just letting everything run wild.
Well, it is. I'm not going to suggest. This is self-denial. This is picking up your cross. This is leaving things on the earth for a future reward. Now, remove the reward, would you follow Jesus? A lot of people are going to make the conclusion, hey, if there's no consequences, I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow I die anyway. Although you could make the case that it's for a better world, a better life, while you are here. Yes, Ann.
The Bible says that Jesus came to seek and save those who were lost.
Right.
So if his purpose is to seek and to save, and those that are lost, they are lost from something and saved for something.
Yes.
Deny his purpose if we don't acknowledge.
Yeah, you can't even talk about Christ without heaven or hell. You're right. But I'm just trying to remove that, from it. Well, I know, because I'm going to put it back in. Jesus saying, you follow him. Is there a reward in following him? Is it okay to be a little selfish? I'm using that word selfish. Who are you doing it for? Self. Well, do you want to escape hell, First of all. And do you want the reward of heaven? Now, who's that for? You or someone else, first of all? It's for me.
And then take as many with you as you can.
That's right. But it starts with, you got to believe that he is, and he's a rewarder of those who seek him. It's okay to seek the reward. The problem with the disciples, they wanted it here and now, and Jesus said, no, it's delayed. Now, we're going to talk about that in a second. Now, you had your hand up.
Psychology shows that everything we do is based on some sort of motivation.
Yes.
We are motivated to do things that either give us something good or avoid punishment. And that's human nature that God put in us. So not only did he put that in us, then he provided us
That's
the
right.
reward and the punishment so that we could follow that.
Yeah. And sometimes they say the fear of losing something is greater than the fear of getting something, right? What else was I say? Oh, in a perfect world, would we love God and follow him just because we have a proper respect and reverence for who he is? We would think so. But that's growth process.
What God wants. And the only way to know is to read his word. And if we were without any reward or punishment, we would live like everybody
That's
else
right.
I know in the world outside of the church.
It takes knowledge.
The same. You've got to know that there is a punishment.
That's
You've
right.
gotta know there is a reward, and that's our job as Christians is to tell the rest of our friends.
That's right.
That's the truth.
That's what makes sense of it all. Now, if you didn't hear what it said, I'm going to echo some of it. We'd like to have this perfect world where we all love God for who he is. And that was enough, right? Because is he worthy of our love and adoration? Yes. Whether there's heaven or hell, is he worthy of it? But who starts there in their growth process spiritually? Now, usually it's a what's in it for me, and we're fearful of going to hell. But we grow into I love it with all my heart, mind, and soul, right? Because for who he is. That's spiritually, it's what happens. It should happen, yes.
Well, I think we have to answer the question, was there a Garden of Eden?
Paradise, yes.
Was there an established way that we should act?
Yes.
And that was God. He gave it to us. So you can't say that at any time there has been a circumstance in which there was not a right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, we don't need the police to enforce the notion of right and wrong, but I'm not sure that saying if everybody lived according to the way that God wanted them to live, we would not need law. We still need law.
Right.
But we're going to keep it. And
Right.
so there is no need for enforcement.
That's what we mean.
And is that possible? I mean, did God really create man to live in the Garden of Eden prior to the influence of sin and intend that that's the way it ought to be?
Yeah, we have to believe it's possible.
I
Yeah.
think that's the way God created
That's
it.
right.
We've become fish out of water, and we live in a world that's tainted by sin.
Right.
It's almost impossible to remove ourselves from the notion of sin, but did God create that? I mean, it boggles the imagination. Did God have a plan whereby women could deliver children without pain?
Initially, that was the case.
Okay.
Right.
As inconceivable as that is to me, having watched my wife give birth,
Well, probably to the women it's more inconceivable, but go ahead. Yeah.
as inconceivable as that is to me, it is also in some ways inconceivable that people would have a relationship with God when there was no reward.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is, I like your point that we grow into maturity.
Yes.
Would a man stay married to his wife if his wife was a vegetable?
That's the same question, right?
And if his entire relationship with her was taking
Yeah.
care of her bodily functions?
Yeah. Now, the difference in that, and I'm glad we're having this discussion, in paradise, you do have a present reward.
Yes.
It's paradise, right? There's no sin, no sickness, nothing. You don't even have to work. You just pick, right? We're in a fallen world now, and there is a lot of suffering. That's right. And so that's why we say if everyone could go back to living like they did, submitting, you could recreate perhaps, and there would be immediate reward. Jesus is promising that that's not going to happen. It's reality, right? It's not going to happen. We live in a fallen world where evil exists. And what he's suggesting here is now there is a reward for all of us. And you should never feel guilty for seeking that reward. But now it's going to be delayed, isn't it? But some of it's even immediate. Because notice what he says. You're going to get 100 times in this present age. That is the here and now. And what does he say? Well, the same brothers, sisters, and mothers, children, and farms that you left. You left one set of family, one farm, and you're getting 100 times more. Now, we know how that works because last Sunday there was 140 people, I can see it, here at worship service. So that's over 100. And so if we have over 100 members, when you become a member of the body of Christ, even just in a local area, you have 100 times more family members than you left. Yes. Now, if they're all following Christ, what is yours is mine, more or less, right? They shared as any had a need, all right? And so my house is your house, inasmuch as you need it. And they did open their homes to each other. They took their meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart. You know, he talks about there is a larger family and you're not alone. And it's what everyone's looking for is connection and you know, just that family. And how many times you've heard someone say, and you felt yourself, my spiritual family is often closer than my physical family. So is this true, this promise that he's had? Absolutely. I mean, yeah, we can give example over example. Now, what does he put with it? Persecutions. That's the picking up your cross. That's, you know, sometimes in following Christ, it's going to be tough. Now, sometimes that even comes from within. As we're going to see with Judas, he betrays his master, right? But get ready for it. Don't think that means Jesus has deserted you and God doesn't care for you or you're not on the right path. It just comes with the package, doesn't it? Persecution. It comes from the world, all right? But then he says in the age to come. So you see two things. The present world, all these physical blessings and the camaraderie and the support of each other. But in the next age, what do you get? Present life, or eternal life. All right? I don't know. I memorized this when I was a young kid, and it's always helped me in a lot of ways. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. Don't look back. It's going to be just fine. God will take care of you here and now and then as well. Okay? Now, notice this saying here. This is where he turns everything upside down, the world order of their day, where he says, many who are first will be last, and the last can be first. Now, he's going to illustrate this later, and it's going to be just the foundation for a lot of these discussions coming up. But Jesus came to serve rather than be served. And he makes the comment in other passages that in the world's order, the great of us of all are the ones being served, right? They're the ones that people, you know, adore and fawn to and just, you know, throw accolade at. But he says, not in my kingdom. This is a great paradox. If you want to be great, you need to be last. If you want to be first place, you need to become servant of all. That's totally the opposite, isn't it? All right? So you think, well, how could you become the greatest by becoming the servant of all? Well, it's going to be, first of all, delayed recognition, isn't it? Because Jesus emptied himself of all his glory of being God, right, in equality with God, emptied himself and took the form of a bondservant, one of us. And how low did he go as a human on this earth? As low as you could go. I mean, he was born in a manger, for crying out loud. Couldn't even get in a room. He's born in a feed stall for an animal. And then, of course, he dies the most despicable death on the cross. But what did God do with him immediately after he became the last of all? How high did it exalt him? Right hand above every name which is named, and put everything in the heavens and on the earth under subjection to him. From the lowest that you could get to the highest you could get. But it came later, didn't it? After he accomplished his work. That's what he's saying. You do what I'm asking you to do. And yeah, you're going to suffer. And in the world's order, you're not really successful. You haven't achieved anything because you're obviously last. That's why they couldn't understand Jesus, all right, and his disciples. But if you choose to be last, delayed gratification, yes, you'll have some pleasures with your family, your Christian family. But what you're looking for is right here, eternal life. And it says in Romans chapter 8 and verse 16, if we are fellow heirs with Christ, he says we'll be glorified with Christ. In other words, whatever he receives as his inheritance, we will receive as well. He says if we suffer with him. But when he comes, we'll be glorified with him. Now, I don't know the extent of that, but there's glory waiting for us that we will truly become first. In every true sense of the word. Now, that's hard, though, isn't it? Delayed gratification, because in our world system, we want everything win. Right now. Yes. Wayne, welcome back. I missed you. I don't know where you were, but...
I find it hard to think. I would rather not be willing to be last.
Yeah.
Is that a foreign feeling to many people here?
You mean here on the earth you'd rather be last?
Do you feel awkward about being told you're going to be first?
That's an interesting question. Maybe if I hear what you're asking, do some people feel awkward being in the spotlight and have the attention on them? Yeah, they do. And some people, they like it. It's like, look at me. It's like you clap for little kids. They're still wanting to be clapped for when they're, 40. That's a whole nother subject, though. Everyone wants to be recognized, and there's some that's more than it's just that. But some people just want to be on top dog. They want to be in control and powerful, right? But what I'm suggesting is everything you're giving up now, you're going to receive a zillion times more than you could ever get on this earth. I'm talking about satisfaction, the peace, the joy, the things we are looking for. Not necessarily first place among others. It's not a competition. But you're going to be looked up to like, wow, if we could have just aspired to be like Wayne. I'm talking about you in heaven. See? Someone had their hand. Yes?
Being first doesn't necessarily mean being top dog in any.
Right.
It's a level of esteem. And the esteem can be self-esteem, the esteem can be the esteem of a few, or it can be the esteem of many.
Sure.
But what he's talking about is just simply if we are willing to put everything else ahead of us, then we will be rewarded.
That's right. And this makes us admire people that are sacrificial, that give up their whole life to serve others. And sometimes they give up their life physically in service to others. And we esteem like, wow, but yet we go off on our own way and just serve ourselves often. I'm talking about the world in general. But don't we admire people? Mother Teresa, what was she so known for? Sacrificial service, for the poor. And so when you see that, we admire it, but it's people being last in the world's view. We tend to even elevate them as first place, right? Let's follow some of this thinking. He says, okay, they're going to Jerusalem now, and we're in verse 32. They're on the road, and Jesus was walking ahead of them, and they were amazed. And they followed and were fearful. That's interesting, those two things, amazed and fearful. And again, he took the 12 and began to tell them what was going to happen to him. This is the third time in 3 chapters, chapter 8, verse 31, chapter 9, verse 31, now in chapter 10 and verse 33, he explains what's going to happen to him as the servant of all, or becoming the last of all. Behold, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles. They will mock him, they will spit upon him, they will scourge him and kill him, and 3 days later he will rise again. Now, we've read earlier, they didn't understand it, they were afraid to ask, but there's just a period, and then there's a paragraph break, and we don't know what happens. But this one is very interesting because we learn some more information. First of all, unlike the first two announcements in chapter 8 and 9, he says, we're going to Jerusalem. This is all going to happen where? Now, Jesus later, he says, it's impossible for a prophet to suffer or die outside of Jerusalem. He said it's been decreed because it's the Jews, God's chosen people, that actually are going to turn against him and kill his prophets. Have they always done that? Yes. So he says that's what's going to happen here. He says he'll be delivered to the chief priests and scribes, the Jews, the religious leaders. But here he also includes the Gentiles. So it's the first time that he says it's going to be the world at large. Now, you can just Google search, who killed Jesus? And there's always this debate. Well, the Jews killed him. And so, no, the Gentiles, the Romans killed him. And so you can't be anti-Semitic, against the Jews because they killed the Messiah. Because it was Pilate that condemned him to death. So the question is, and we have to answer, who killed Jesus? The world did. Satan had him. But it's both Jew and Gentile. Gentile is anyone that's not a Jew, all right? Because it was a combined effort to put him to death. Now, the Jews didn't have legal authority to kill anyone, even though sometimes the Roman government turned their head away and allowed them to do certain things. But when it comes to something like this, they had to have Rome actually do the execution of Jesus. When Pilate gives them a choice, he says, who do you want me to release, Barabbas or Jesus? Who did they cry out for? And he said, why? This man's done nothing wrong, Jesus. And he said, no, crucify him, crucify him. So who's the one that condemned him to death? The Jews. Who's the one that actually killed him? The Romans. So they were both in it together. You see that? And so it's really a moot point to even discuss it. It's both parties together. Now notice also, they're going to condemn him. That cries of some type of judicial judgment going on here. There's going to be a mock trial. They're going to come up with false crimes, but yet we're going to condemn them to death. It's not going to be, in their eyes, a murder, right? That really wasn't a murder? Yes, they murdered an innocent man. And so we'll see there's going to become a trial, but then look at the humiliation that's going to take place. Now, what did Jesus say? Because Peter asked him, what about us? What are we going to get? Jesus said, well, in this life, you're going to get all these great things and persecutions, right? And now he's outlining some of them. They're going to mock me. They're going to spit on my face. They're going to flog him, lay his back open. You want to come follow me? Yeah, that's self-denial, isn't it? But then he says they're going to eventually kill him, but 3 days later he will rise again. Now, we have the benefit of looking back. We understand it all. But if you were walking with Jesus as one of the 12, would you understand any of this? No. How are you going to allow yourself to be killed? Peter already pulled him aside and said, Lord, this will never happen to you. You're the king. This will never happen. What are you talking about? And what did Jesus say? Get behind me. You're not thinking like God. You're thinking like the world. See, they don't get it. Now, what's really interesting is the next request by James and John. So I have it on the board. I think I skipped one. Oh, yeah, here it is. James, verse 35. Immediately after he's had this discussion with them, the next thing Mark records, James and John, the two sons of Zebedee, they were fishermen. They come up to Jesus and says, teacher, we want you to do whatever we ask of you. This is amazing. First of all, we're going to pray to you, but you have to agree to give us what we want before we tell you what it is. Isn't that what they're saying? Now, one of hand, it shows a lot of faith, right? That he's able to do whatever Jesus says he'll do. He can do it. But also it's really selfish, isn't it? It's really self-serving. And he just got done telling about what's going to happen to him. He just told them the principle, the last shall be first and the first shall be last. And they're going, Jesus, we got a request of you. We're going to ask you something. You got to agree to do, we're asking you to do for us what we ask, no matter what it is. And he said, well, what do you want me to do for you? He says, well, grant that we may sit. Grant shows that it's up to Jesus. They recognize that, right? Yes. They also recognize he's going to be becoming king, and they're wanting positions of power and authority. That we, John and James, can sit on your right and on your left in your glory. So here's the king. Who's on the right hand? Who's on the left? James and John. These guys got a plan, don't they? Could Jesus have granted it? Well, on one hand, no, because it's counter to his mission and who he is. But does he have authority to put any more he wants up there? Right. Now, are the other 10 going to get wind of this? Is that going to cause some indignation? Oh, yeah. Do they get it? You know, you look at it and go, what are you doing asking for this? But then we look at ourselves, we're not much different, are we? Sometimes our prayers are that. We don't say, Lord, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to say yes before I ask it. We might not say that, but we often might think it. Lord, I'm coming to you because I really need this now. And you say, whatever I pray for, you're going to give to me if I pray for it in your name. And so if you really love me and you really care for me, I need this and I need it now. And then when God doesn't answer a prayer, that's what we think. We think he doesn't care for us or he's not being faithful. But sometimes he answers your prayer by saying what? No. Or not now. So he comes back and here's what he says. And Jesus said to him, you don't know what you're asking. Now, that's really interesting. If you want to get there, you got to go through what I'm going to go through. Then we can talk about it. You don't know what you're asking. You're not able to drink the cup that I drink or be baptized with the baptism which I'm to be baptized. Are you able to it? And they go, yeah, we're able. I said, no, you don't get it. So I have to understand what he's talking about. He just got done telling them about how he's going to be humiliated. He's going to be crucified. He's going to be spit upon. That's the cup. The word cup is used throughout the Old Testament as metonymy or for the wrath of God. It's in Isaiah, the cup of his wrath, the goblet that makes men stagger. Jeremiah, take from my hand the cup filled with the wine of my wrath, and they drink it and they'll stagger. Ezekiel, you'll drink it and it'll drain it dry and it'll tear your breast. So when God pours out his cup of wrath, it's because their cup of iniquity is full. He said, I've had so much patience and forgiveness and mercy, but now you just consistently rebel against me. I'm going to pour out my wrath upon you. That's justice, right? Now, when God pours out wrath, it's going to be severe, isn't it? So this word cup that he's speaking of is referring to, first of all, wrath. Now, coming from initially the Jews and the Gentiles. It's their wrath directed towards Jesus. But in the bigger picture, whose wrath is it? Huh? Why would you say the Father's? Why would God have indignation and wrath towards Jesus?
Because he became the propitiation for sin.
All right. That was a big religious word. Propitiation of sins, but exactly right. The wrath that should fall upon me because of my rebellion and my sinfulness. Judicial wrath, right? You do the crime, you do the time. Jesus said it's going to fall upon me. He willingly took God's wrath that should have fallen on you, and he said, I'll let it fall on me. That's the essence of his sacrifice. I'll do for you what you can't do for yourself. I'll take the wrath. Like, why would you do that? Why would you take God's wrath? Well, it's God's plan, but it's because he loves us. That's what it's all about. And what parent wouldn't do something for their child the same way if perhaps given the choice? So that's what he's talking about, this cup. Now, this word baptism means immersion. So he's going to be immersed in intense misery and sorrow and wrath when he dies on the cross. It's all around him. It's an immersion in such pain. He says, are you able to drink this and be baptized? And they're going, what? Yeah, we could do that. Do they have any clue what they're asking? What's interesting, everyone had to. Every disciple ended up dying a martyr's death, except for, as best we understand, John. Hung upside down, sawn in two, burned at a stake. They suffered wrath for Christ. Yes. Josiah.
One of the things that's really funny about this, though, is nowadays, a couple of men called Diamond Kruger have, in psychology, have found out that there's this effect that the people that have some of the least amount of knowledge in the subject usually have the most confidence in that subject.
Yeah.
And it's true. If you know very little about
Yeah.
it, you can, again, it's not that you don't know anything.
Yeah.
You just know just enough to be dangerous.
Yeah. No, and isn't that interesting? I could do that. Then you find out, no, there's a lot more involved than you think. That's interesting. Notice what he says. Jesus said, the cup that I drink, you shall drink. You don't realize it, but you're going to. You're going to suffer. And you shall be baptized with the baptism which I'm baptized. That's the baptism of suffering that he's speaking of. It's a figurative baptism. But to sit on my right or my left, that's not mine. But it's for those whom it has been prepared. So that's an interesting statement too. Now, I think we have enough time because we're just going to go on. And what he says, hearing this, the 10 began to feel indignant with James and John. Oh, really? This is going to cause this rivalry and division potentially in the 12 who are supposed to be Christ's missionary team to the world. And here now they're fighting amongst each other. So Jesus calls them to himself and says, you know that those who are recognized as rulers of Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. In their day, they did. They would say, do it, and they have to. They could seize property. They could do all sorts of things because they were in charge. And that's what John and James seemingly are asking for, that kind of authority. Not to seize things, but to abuse it, but have that kind of authority. But Jesus said, it's not going to be that way in my kingdom. When you're a disciple of mine and you want to rule, here's how you rule. If you want to be great, you got to become what? A servant. That's totally backwards, isn't it? Totally backwards. But he says that's a great paradox, because if you wish to be first, you got to become the slave of all. Like, what? We're trying to escape slavery so we can become the master and not the servant. And now you're the servant to become the greatest? Of course, isn't that exactly what Jesus demonstrates in his own life? For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. This verse is now the first time really we have the whole mission of Christ in one verse. He came. That shows he was pre-existent, right? He came to the earth. Not to serve, but not to be served, but to serve. And give his life a ransom. Let's break this down and we'll be done. It's interesting. The greater you are, the more people you'll serve. Isn't that true? All right. And it's actually winning through losing in the world's eyes. So let's look at this word ransom. He gave his life. First of all, it shows he's pre-existent. Jesus did not become the Son of God until he was born on the earth. Is that right? Before that, he was just the pre-incarnate Christ. That's what they call him. Because incarnation is where God was incarnate or took the form of flesh. But did Jesus exist before he became the Son of God? Absolutely. He was in the beginning. So he's pre-existent. And he said, before Abraham was, I am. He was back there. But this idea of ransom, you have different ideas about it. We think ransom is Well, let's just say what it means back here is to buy back. And so you have a slave that is committed to this person for 10 years because he sold himself into slavery, he was bought into slavery, and you want to release him from his slavery. And so the way you do that is pay a price to buy them out of slavery. And that's what the word Jesus is using here. It's judicial. There's a price to be paid, but it assumes a bondage. Now, what kind of bondage is he talking about? Not to man, but to Satan and to sin. There's a legal control Satan has over everyone who sinned, that they cannot be with God because God is perfectly righteous and we're all unrighteous. And so there's a bondage and assumes there has to be a price to be paid. And can I pay it myself? Only by giving my own life, dying, and be eternally separated from God. I cannot pay the price, see, to buy myself out. It's not possible. And so there's a size of his payment. What is it? He's going to give his life. God is giving himself for the creation. And it just, again, that just boggles the mind why we do that. Who are the recipients? Just Jews? What does he say? Give his life a ransom for... It's going to be all men. That was God's plan. Then it also assumes a new relationship. Why would I say that? When God buys you out of slavery, who do you belong to? And we don't realize that sometimes, and sometimes we do, but it's a good thing. That's why Paul says, you're not your own. You've been bought with a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body. Are we glad to be owned by God and live, for him? Well, yes, because there's going to be glory. But there's the substitutionary death of Christ for us. And that's what the Jews didn't understand. It's what the disciples didn't understand at all. All right, any thoughts or questions about that? Because I think we'll stop right there. Because that ends, no. They always say I go long. So I'm going to stop short. Barnabas will be the last recorded miracle in the book of Mark. Not the last miracle, but the last one recorded. And it's about a blind man. And why do you think Mark ends with a miracle about a blind man receiving his sight? Does it fit in with this overall context at all? How so? Hopefully it's obvious. Yeah, the disciples, they're blind, aren't they? Are the Jews blind too? They're all. And God's here just to open our eyes so we can see really what's true and what's life indeed. And Barnabas will be just a case example of a man physically blind, but out of faith and persistence, he says, Lord, please. So we'll look at that next week, and then we'll look at chapter 11. All right, thank you.